weeks, but there's a whole new dimension to the story and how Twitter and other social media have used artificial intelligence to do even more damage, potentially, to our Constitution. And the person who's been at the forefront of exposing this is our friend Kris Ruby. She's CEO of the Ruby Media Group, and she's done an entire expose that you can find at rubyfilesmediagroup.com. You see right there, Twitter AI is in artificial intelligence, the role of artificial intelligence in content moderation. And Kris Ruby joins us now. Kris, good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. Thanks for having me, Ed.
We really appreciate you being here. We're going to walk through all of these different elements, but I want to start with this one. You have a lot of insiders talking to you, and this is something our audience gets very fired up about, and in how children have been exploited in this country. And at Sparkling Ruby on Twitter, which is where you are, you had an insider say, did we support at Twitter child sexual exploitation? Of course not. Did we devote enough resources to it? No. We should have devoted much more. It was not a priority. How in the world in America could a social media giant like this not make that a priority? Your thoughts?
Well, so I think that's a really interesting and nuanced comment that was added to the discussion here by a former Twitter employee, which is to say that we were focused on other things, right? They're outright admitting that it was a mistake, that there was not enough resources allocated to address or even tackle the problem, that from trust and safety, it wasn't prioritized in any way, and that other things were prioritized over addressing child sexual exploitation. So they're not saying outright that they didn't do anything, but in the same quote, they did say that only 1 or 2 engineers in total was focused on addressing that issue. And that's really just not acceptable for a company of Twitter size.
Absolutely. Great point. Even deeper is the contrast to what they did focus on. And what you're uncovering, again, people can read all of this. You have a long article, rubyfilesmediagroup.com, is they were going after Mike Lindell, and they were using artificial intelligence. We'll put it on the screen. Here's one of your tweets. Anytime they saw the phrase "my pillow," they were springing into action. So let's talk about that. But obviously, and why in the world they're targeting Mike Lindell, because perhaps he's exposing election fraud in this country and the machines and the rest of it. But in contrast to, they were not using AI, at least not to a major extent, to protect children. Talk about that context.
Correct. So in natural language processing, there's something called n-grams. And so the screenshot that you just saw that I had posted was from the n-gram list that I reviewed in the data set. And you can see that my pillow is mentioned over and over and over again. Another term was 2,000 mules, or Patriot, or USA, or American, or Hunter Biden's laptop. So the question is, who's really determining what NLP was looking for in these AI systems at Twitter? And the source that I spoke with really said that there were a number of different organizations, including government organizations, trust and safety, academic researchers, and the Center for Digital Hate. And that came from the top down to influence, obviously, what was being programmed for stop words in Twitter's AI system. But of course, this really begs to question, why were these words being used at all?
Absolutely. And try to explain, I know you're still trying to sort of peel this onion, but what would happen when the artificial intelligence found my pillow? Did they swoop in and suppress it? Did they what?
So they reviewed it. That's a great question. So what they did is once they saw my pillow, so they're not saying that any time my pillow was used, we automatically removed it, suspended, censored, or banned it. What they're saying is that based on the entity of my pillow, we determined that from an entity correlation, my pillow was often used in correlations with other terms like Trump, like MAGA, like Patriot, like election fraud. So they determined as a whole that those things, those terms signaled U.S. political misinformation, and then it would go to be flagged for manual review. I think one of the things that people are not realizing when they look at these other Twitter files is that those really tell a story about what happened to public figures and conservatives that everyone knows that are named household brands, right? It doesn't tell the story of what happened to everyday users on the right who maybe had only a few hundred accounts or a few hundred, followers. And that's why this data is so important, because you can see that most of this is being done by bots, algorithms, and AI in the background, not humans.
Incredible. One more that I want to highlight. You alluded to this by saying trigger words were patriot, American, I believe you said. And what about American flags? That the American flag emoji, and particularly multiple flags, were just one thing we look for, this one insider told you. We found them likely to be associated with misinformation. Unbelievable that they targeted people using flag emojis, but then to make this sweeping generalization, which I find to be BS, that if you post American flag emojis, you're associated with disinformation. This is like a communist country, is it not?
Ed, it is. And you know what? I'm sitting there wondering, like, are we even in America? Like, what country are we in? Like, what country do we live in now where big tech is telling us that if you use an American flag, it is deemed misinformation with NLP? I mean, that is just astounding. And what's even more astounding, Ed, is that you seem to be the only one interested in this story. Where's the rest of the media on this? I mean, this is a total bombshell. You cannot use the American flag emoji on social media without an algorithm saying it's misinformation.
Let's end on that. We've got just about a minute. Why isn't the mainstream media covering this? And what's your guess as a social media executive at the Ruby Media Group at the idea that this is undoubtedly not just Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google? They're probably all doing it.
Yes, 100%. This story is not unique to Twitter. And from what I've looked at, these same data scientists that are held in high esteem and are responsible for quote unquote responsible AI are the same people at Meta, at Pinterest, at very large corporations. And the reason why is because I think for a long time they banked on the fact that most people don't really understand AI. I mean, even when I write about this on Twitter, no one knows what I'm talking about. And so it's very hard to sort of explain to people what this means. And I think that the people who are in charge of data science at these big tech companies have some of the most important jobs in the country right now in terms of possibly censoring, monitoring, or suppressing speech. Those who control the algorithms control the language. If you don't understand that, you cannot have an intellectually honest conversation about free speech in this country.
Well, you've been honest about it. It's chilling. Kris Ruby, thank you and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Ed.
All right. Coming up.